All right, so today I wanted to talk about a topic that is very popular in the gun, especially the YouTube gun video community, and that is the SHTF guns. Now, what is the best one? Now, most of the video, well, in fact, basically all the videos are Americans. Now, the problem with those videos is that as a Canadian, especially after the ban, vast majority of them are not available to Canadians, right? Now, here's the thing. Of all the guns, let's say there was no restrictions, to me, hands down, it would be a high quality, even a moderately high quality AR-15, probably 16, maybe 18-inch barrel, depending on the geography of where you were, if you were in the city or on the country. To me, it's not even. I don't even think there's a close second, to be quite honest. But the problem is that they are banned in Canada, and even pre-ban they were restricted, right? So again, we have to take a step back and say, okay, what is it? Now, I have two examples, basically. Well, one specific, two, the second one's a little bit different. But in my mind, it all depends on what is your budget, right? What is your budget? Simply because the first option for me would be the SKS, right? Now, a lot of people, the SKS, it's nowhere near as good as an AR-15 or even some of the other guns out there. But here's the thing with the SKS. Number one, I mean, the wood ones, they're basic. They're nothing fancy, but you can get somewhat tactical SKSs. You basically have to stick with iron sights. There's no real third part, aftermarket mounts that really work. That's one of the many problems with the SKS. But the one thing is that if you get a good one, they are pretty reliable. And the most important thing, I believe, is the ammo is cheap. I mean, it's even cheaper than 223 right now. Um, and it's it packs a punch, at least at close range. But the main thing is that it's cheap. And here's the other thing that I would point out before we get too deep into things here. In my mind, having ammo is arguably the most important thing when it comes to it, because if you have the most tricked out, high quality AR-15 or AK you can imagine, it doesn't matter if you have no ammo, right? If you have no ammo, the gun is useless. It's a paperweight, right? So the one thing I would point out is that you would be better off having 5,000 rounds of ammo and a wood stock SKS than you would be 1,000 rounds or less and in a high quality whatever other gun you have in your mind, right? So that's the first thing I would say is that you gotta have ammo. Now, no, you shouldn't go buy all that ammo at once, right? Obviously, in my opinion, you stock up over a year or two or three or four or five, whatever, and then once you get to that, whatever it is. In my mind, it's at least 2,000. I would say upwards of five. It depends how much you shoot to. Some people may even have to be a little bit more. But I would say at least I would say in that 2 to 5,000 range, depending on how much you shoot. And then all you do is you just write down when you buy it, the day you bought it, and you just shoot the oldest stuff, right? It's pretty simple. So that's the first thing that I would say. But the second thing is that in my mind, it comes down to one thing on what is the best gun, and it comes down to what is your budget. You don't have a high budget, you go with the SKS. Now that it comes back to you, do you want the wood stock or do you want the Tapco? There's a handful of other aftermarket stocks out there. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much. Um, as someone who's taller, the Woodstock SKSs don't work very well for me. But if you're under like 5'11", even 6 foot roughly, it depends how long your arms and stuff are. The Woodstock ones will do fine. But another thing that really helps with them too is betting the actions. And you got to practice too, especially with iron sights, because you give an average guy an SKS at 100 yards, they can barely even hit a torso sights target, right? You practice, you can easily get that down to, I mean, if you're really good, probably 3, 4 inch groups. Even if you're pretty good, probably 5, 6 inch groups, right? So that's another thing too. You got to practice, and that's why having ammo on hand is very important. Um, so come, and not to mention too, the Woodstock ones are going to be a decent amount cheaper too. They're in that, I think, 500. I think is probably roughly what the cheapest you're gonna find them for. The aftermarket ones you're looking at 6, 7, even upwards of like 800. I've seen. So the SKSs are getting up there in price. Um, buying a good used one is always an option, but again, you got to make sure that the gun's in good shape and everything. Um, Now, again, what is the alternatives? Now, the reason why I bring up why your budget is so important, because if you're going to buy a higher quality gun, you're looking at least two, upwards of $3,000 or $4,000 for one of the higher quality semi-automatic guns, because there's barely any of them left, and even if there was, you still would have to spend close to that anyway. Um, there's still a decent amount of examples, but the Wolverine Supplies one, that one's, it's in like the mid-thousand or like 1,500 roughly. Those have very mixed reviews. In my mind, you got to spend at least 2,000 to get one of the better ones. Now, that's why the budget is so important, because you got to be willing to drop, like I say, $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 plus another, let's say, 500 bucks on an optic. And you got to probably spend another $200-300 getting mags. You could spend another even upwards of $500 on accessories, right? You sling, flashlight. I mean, who knows? So you're going to be spending at least $3,000 on this gun. And SKS, again, you're looking at 500 to 700 roughly. So the difference in price is very, very large. So like I say, in my opinion, you don't want to spend a lot of money. An SKS is actually not too bad, right? Especially if you practice on it. Again, there's ones with aftermarket magazines, although the problem is that the good ones, the ones you can actually change out fast, are quite a bit more expensive. But again, even if you have 4 or 5 of those in a SHTF situation, I think that would be enough. Ideally, you have more, but that would be enough, right? So again, in my opinion, it all comes down to your budget, right? It all comes down to your budget. How much are you willing to spend? If you're willing to spend, $3, $4, $5,000, you got that kind of money, absolutely buy one of the nicer guns. If not, get an SKS. Make sure it's a good quality one, and then once you do, you practice on it. Betting the action will improve the accuracy, because a lot of them are very, very inaccurate. If you get a good one, you bet the action, you can get it to be actually fairly accurate if you practice on it. Not to mention, too, they're fairly reliable guns if you get a good one. Even average ones are actually pretty good. That is one thing about SKS, is that they are pretty fairly reliable. I'm not going to say they're super reliable, but they're fairly reliable. So at the end of the day, in my mind, SHTF in Canada, those are your options, right? Those are your options. And again, a lot of people are going to scoff at the SKS, but it's like, and a lot of this is for new gun owners as well. It's like, what other options do you have? Like, there isn't really a lot of other options. I mean, um, the best SHTF gun is a gun that can do everything, right? And that's something you can hunt with, you can defend yourself with, you can, clear houses with, like, you can do everything. And I mean, SKSs, they're not super, concealable or small, but they're not huge, right? Especially if you get a folding stock, they're not that big, right? And like I say, you can take a deer with them. You want a gun that can do as many things as possible, right? Obviously, there's guns that are going to be better for close quarters combat. Obviously, there's going to be guns that are going to be better for hunting. But the one thing is that you can do everything with it, right? And you're not going to be able to do long range shooting, but even if you're moderately accurate, you can still go out to 2, 3, 4, even 500 yards. Some of these guys are very, very accurate, with open sights if you practice, right? So in my mind, one of the most important things is that you have to be able to practice, right? Someone who practices all the time on an SKS in a firefight probably would still be able to, overtake someone with a higher quality semi-auto if they practice a lot more. So anyway, that's my opinion. I'd love to hear other people's opinion on the topic. So again, make sure you comment, hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and yeah, stay tuned for more.